Hello and welcome back to the Brain First Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Eileen Devine, and today on the podcast, I am sitting down with Amy Lang, who is a sexuality educator and expert, and we have a very frank and open conversation about sex education for children, what they need to know, when they need to know it, and why it's so important that parents get support in having this important conversation with their kids. So before I go any further, I wanted to make sure that you were clear on the topic for today's episode and that we will be referring to body parts by their proper names and talking about a topic that you may not want your little ones who may be around you to hear about at their age and their development. So if you have kids, little ones with you, I'll give you a moment to pause the podcast so that you can come back to it later. Okay, I want to officially introduce my guest, Amy Lang. Amy is a longtime sexual health educator. She is the founder of Birds and Bees and Kids. She's helped thousands of parents build stronger, more open communication with their kids about sexuality and relationships. Amy holds a certificate in neurodiversity and sexuality and offers specialized support for parents of neurodivergent children. She also works with early childhood and youth serving professionals as a sexual abuse prevention specialist. This is such an important topic, and it's one that comes up in my work with parents all the time. So I was thrilled to have Amy on and to be able to have this conversation with her and to give her the opportunity to share all of her expertise with you. Hi there, and welcome to the Brain First Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Eileen Devine, and I am a therapist, parent coach, and educator who supports parents that are raising children, teens, and young adults with brain-based differences and challenging behavioral symptoms. If you are a parent or caregiver of a child who has intense, confusing, relentless, or sometimes even scary behaviors, you are in the right place, and I am so glad you're here. Let's get started. Hi, Amy. Welcome to the Brain First Parenting Podcast. I'm so glad that you could join me today. Thanks for making the time.
Oh, absolutely. I'm super excited to talk with you.
Great. I am excited for the listeners to get to know you. And I always begin with my guests with the question of how they came to the work that they're doing and why they feel so passionately about it. So I would love for you to share that with our listeners to get us started.
Absolutely, because I kind of have a weird job that I made up for myself. So the quick version is that I was a sex educator doing all the usual pregnancy, birth control counseling, STI counseling. Loved it. Assumed that I was going to be a rock star when it came time to talk to my kids. And my son was about 5 and he was getting ready for a bath. And he grabbed his penis and he said, "Hey, Mama, did you know?" And I stood there and thought, please do not tell me it feels good to touch your penis because I have got nothing. But I was good and I poker faced and I said, "What?" And he said, I can see the veins. I can see the veins where the blood goes. And I said, "Great." And that was my moment where I was like, great, I'd rather talk to a 15-year-old about their pregnancy than my 5-year-old about his penis.
Yeah.
So I got to work and started to research how to do this, like what, when, and how, and what this should look like for our family. And then as I was doing that, I realized I could help other parents. I have a master's degree and my focus was in adult education. So in 2006, I combined my favorite things, teaching adults and talking about sex. And I started Birds and Bees and Kids. And then the neurodivergent piece happened working with neurodivergent families because I do consultations. They're called quickies because I'm funny. And I noticed that I'd be talking with someone and they would just drop in autistic, ADHD, or neurodivergent. And I was like, what's going on here? And then I started asking at the top of the consultation, neurodivergence in the family. And I felt like 2/3 of the parents were saying yes. It
Yeah.
probably wasn't that much, but it was a lot.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, they need help. Like what is out there for you? So I went out in the world to find resources and I found nothing. Okay, not nothing, but basically nothing specifically for parents of neurodivergent kids. And there are some books from the before times that are pretty good, the Tom and Ellie series, and we'll make sure you have all that. And then there's another book that's kind of for teenagers and parents, and then there's some stuff for young adults. But there aren't any really straight up resources, especially for families. So I was needed a new challenge and I love to learn. So I was like, okay, I can do this. So I got a certification in sexuality and neurodiversity from Mercy College. I have been reading, listening, researching. I have a focus group and I'm learning from parents all the time because your kids are vulnerable and they have a human right to this information. They're just like everybody else.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, well, thank you for doing this work. There's a lot of professionals who are out there doing important, meaningful work, and they don't recognize the need for that work to shift when working with families who have neurodivergence in their family. So I appreciate you being sensitive to that and
Mm,
recognizing that program that you went through. I didn't even know something like that exists. So that's
yeah.
really cool. The other piece, having, a 16-year-old who is very neurodivergent and an 18-year-old who's what society would consider neurotypical. As a
Mm,
parent, I've had a firsthand experience of, they're both teenagers, and yet their ability to understand what's happening with their body
mm,
and these feelings that they're feeling and all of those types of pieces is very, very different. The way that I talk to both of them looks
mm.
very, very different. So just highlighting the importance of your work and so much appreciation for it.
Thank you. And I should be clear. I'm not neurodivergent and my child is not neurodivergent. He's 44 and at 44. Um I know, I look so young. He's 24 and he is out of the nest. But my spouse, and I have permission to share this, is dyslexic. And we didn't know that was a neurodivergence. And it explained so much about him to me as a person who was annoyed by some of his behaviors, because it was like, oh, this is common, what's happening with him. And so that made me much more kinder and accepting of, the leg wiggling and all that stuff. So that's my experience of neurodivergence, but we didn't know until I started doing this work that was a neurodivergence. So I just want to be upfront about that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I know our listeners will appreciate hearing that experience too. It's what we talk about with parenting all the time is once we understand the reason behind that behavior, it replaces that frustration or annoyance with curiosity and
Hmm.
understanding. So I can imagine the impact that it.
Hmm. Yeah, it was good.
I've heard you speak on other podcasts about the issue of sex education for our kids being a health issue, being a safety issue, which I think is really helpful for parents to hear and think about, especially if this is a topic that is really uncomfortable for them. And we'll talk about that, why that might
Everybody.
be,
Yeah, they're
right?
not alone. Yeah.
So understanding, no, this is about health and safety, that feels different, I think, for parents, and maybe pushes them, nudges them to get more comfortable with
Hmm.
having
Hmm.
these discussions with their kids. So I would love to just hear a little bit more about that perspective
Yeah.
that you hold.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So one of these, it absolutely is about health and safety, because this is one of the biggest things we do in our lives. I believe that I don't need to say I believe this. Everybody has some experience of themselves as a sexual person, as a romantic person, gender and all of that. And so what is super important for everybody and every child is to have information about this because your kids are very vulnerable, because, for a variety of reasons, the masking and not getting the social cues and easily misled. And then also the other way they're vulnerable is for those unintended incidents where there's blurting, like nice boobs, like they don't intend harm, right? But that's interpreted as being consciously sort of a sexual harassment assault kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what we know is that knowledge is empowering. So when you're willing to be uncomfortable and make sure your kids are educated about sexuality, those kids are safer. They're safer from sexual abuse. They're safer, they make better decisions. They feel more comfortable and confident in their, as whoever they are as a sexual person. And one of the things that I think gets kind of left out of the conversation or different perspective is yes, health, yes, safety. And the other piece is preparation, like preparing them for what this is going to look like to them. And lots of neurodivergent folks are asexual or aromantic, which means they're not interested in sex, they're not interested in romance. And many a teenager's like, I'm out, I'm not interested. Like many a kid's like, I'm never doing this. But even if your child is telling you that, or you have made assumptions because of, what level your child is, I never know the right words for this, or their support needs, you need to treat them as though they are like every other child and have a right to this information because they're going to be hanging out with people who are confusing, right?
Hanging out with people in person or online.
Mm-hmm.
I always think, if we are not at the forefront of this, giving our kids this information, they're going to find it from other sources. And it may not be what we want their entry into this to be.
For sure.
The other piece that I think about is even the kids who are like, I'm not interested, this is embarrassing, whatever it might be, things are still happening with their body.
Uh-huh.
And them understanding that.
Yeah.
It's not something to be ashamed of, that it's actually a very normal part of human development. I mean, those things are going to happen anyways.
Right.
But the other piece that I hear you speaking to, which our listeners will definitely relate to, is understanding that uneven development or, where your child is in relation to where society expects them to be in terms of their ability of what can they understand. Are they very concrete and black and white? Are they going to pick up on it if you're not direct in your language?
Yeah.
Are they going to be able to connect the dots and get the gist of what you're saying? Many of these kids can't do that. So just reemphasizing what you're suggesting that parents.
Yeah. And that is a big thing. And also that, like, I don't care if I stink, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't care that the world doesn't cares. I don't care if I stink. That's kind of social stuff. And I just want to kind of piggyback on what you said about puberty and body changes. For neurodivergent kids, it can be very distressing. It can be physically uncomfortable. It can be scary. Like, you're going to bleed once a month until you're, 48, 50.
Yes.
Having, erections, some random acts of senseless boners, as I like to call them, which can be uncomfortable and painful. And so one of the best ways to support kids is they need to know about puberty. Everybody really should know the changes of the body through puberty by the time they're about 8 or 9. And then with your neurodivergent child, you can plan and introduce the ideas slowly so they know what to expect. And one of the things I think sometimes parents think, and in particular with neurodivergent kids, you're like, oh my God, my kid's 9. They shouldn't know about puberty. Average age of start of puberty, which is a physical change and a emotional, mental, social change, is 9 for girls. And it's about 10 for boys. And so even though they might be, sort of operating on the level of a 6-year-old and they're 9, they have to know.
Yes.
They have to know. And it doesn't hurt them to have information about their bodies and biology.
Right. I'm so glad that you named the ages because I think for many of us who are in our 40s, 50s, we don't remember what it's like. And hearing that age might surprise some folks like, man, is it that early? Right?
Oh,
and so
yeah.
Understanding that is what happens. I would love to hear any suggestions or advice that you have for parents who want to begin these conversations with their kids, but don't know where to begin. Because I can imagine knowing my listeners that they're like, okay, I get it. And also it's super uncomfortable. I have no idea what to do. So where to get started?
Yeah. So a couple things. So first of all, with neurodivergent kids, because puberty can be such a big deal for them, I actually recommend oftentimes recommend starting there, especially if you have a kid that's 8, 9, 10, because what you can say is your kid body is going to turn into an adult body. And so you're introducing that idea because we need to get them ready for that. But ideally, in the Amy's perfect world, you're engaging with your kids and you're teaching them about this. Body boundaries always, teaching agreement, permission, saying okay to physical touch goes both ways. That should start at birth. With our impulsive kids, we need to kind of push on that a little harder. But they should know the basics of how babies are made by the time they're 5 or 6.
Mhm.
Everybody take a breath. Um, One of the delightful things about neurodivergent human beings is that they just take it in as most kids take this in as information. So if you say, this is the usual way a baby's made and this is how butter's made, they're like, whatever,
Got
right?
it.
It's the
Very
same to them, right? Very matter of fact, we're the ones that are going, oh my God. And that's because we've had sex. We know, right? We have this experience of sexuality and relationships. We live in our world, right? So we come to the conversation with a whole bunch of stuff. And our kids are, I like to think of them as empty vessels that we get to fill up with accurate information, our values, and then cementing this in your family. Like we communicate about this, we talk about this. This is a part of our family life.
Yeah.
And what this does is it establishes you as the go-to person. Your kid learns that if they're, on the playground and somebody's talking about something and they do not know what it is, but they might have an inkling that it might be something sexual, they're more likely to come home and say like, so how'd it go today? Anything weird happen? And be like, yes, the kids were talking about this and I don't know what it is. And then you're right there to say, oh yeah, they were talking about XYZ.
Yes. Yes. I love that. What you just touched on, and I mean, from the very beginning of this conversation, you've been touching on are the parents' deeply held beliefs and values that, about what is appropriate,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what is okay and what
Mm-hmm.
is acceptable societally. And I can imagine that getting in the way for a lot of parents. And it's not about not having deeply held beliefs and values. Like as a parent, like you said, I love that idea of you have this empty vessel that you get to fill with what you think is good and right, appropriate, and about being a good person. But what advice would you give to a parent who's maybe recognizing, yeah, the way I was raised or the community I was brought up in, like we did not talk about this and it feels shameful or it feels
Mm-hmm.
bad or it
Mm-hmm.
feels not right. Like, where do you begin with parents who bring that to you and helping them get more comfortable
Yeah.
with starting this conversation?
So everybody comes into this with something like that,
Yeah.
right? We didn't get the information when we needed it. It came too late. It didn't come at all. And it was like wackadoodle because it was from our peers and so we were all sort of like trying to sort it out. And then if you come from a culture where there's a lot of shame, a lot of emphasis on waiting and abstinence and all that, which is a tall order. Like nobody waits. Like the percentage of people who abstain until marriage is itty bitty. So one of the things I highly recommend you do, which is I like to give baby homework, is very interesting, entertaining, and important, is to take some time. And if you're parenting with someone or you have a good friend or you journal and write down where you got your information, like all of your sources. And I do want to acknowledge that this can be triggering. Where you got your information, what the values messages were. Like one of the biggest ones is wait until marriage.
Mm.
And yeah, that's a great goal. But what's really going on there? Like if you want your child to do that, personally that that's really a hard ask, especially like for an ADHDer. That's a virtual impossibility, unfortunately. So saying, our hope is that you will wait until you're in a loving, committed relationship. You can communicate with your partner. You say yes, they say yes. You have a safe place. If someone can get pregnant, you've worked out the birth control situation. And we'd like it if you tell us to make sure that you're feeling okay about it. You won't get in trouble.
Yes.
Right? So when you do that little exercise, what it does is it kind of which shows you what worked and what didn't, and then where your values are and those values messages you got, like girls who have sex are sluts and boys who are studs, like that nonsense, which is getting better, which like just institutes this, I'm just gonna say misogynist culture of shame for women, right? So that's a really good thing to do. And then most of us have a lot of misinformation about what kids need to know by when. And so the big deal is that everybody had sex ed of some sort in fifth grade. That is too late, especially in our world. Pushing through those myths, like I believe you want your child to grow up to be a whole, healthy, happy person, right? To have fulfilling relationships, to feel good about themselves as a sexual person, whatever that looks like. And the way to prepare them for that is to be bold, to be a leader in your community, to say, yeah, we're talking about this because they're going to hear about it. And you got your little black and white thinkers.
Yeah.
They can get in trouble.
Yes. Yes.
They can get in trouble.
Yes.
I have a story. Do you want to hear it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, of course. So just as an example of the black and white thinking and where things can get in trouble and why you need to be concrete and clear. So I have a client, I think her son is 11, he's autistic, and she has like followed me for a long time. Her kids are really well informed. They talk openly in her family. And so he was talking to somebody, one of his peers, and so this might be a little triggering, but hang in there with me. He said, I'm going to have sex with my sister.
Mm.
And this was overheard
Mm.
by an adult, called CPS, the whole rigmarole, because he said this thing. It was really awful. And finally, I think the mom finally said to him, "What did you mean? Like, why did you say that?" Well, he said, "Well, you told me that later when I'm older and like an adult and it's time for me to have sex, I should love my partner.
Yeah.
I should have a good friendship with them. We should be able to communicate really well and have fun together. And everybody needs to agree." And she's like, "And
Yeah.
don't do this with people we're related to."
Yeah.
So she did all the right things and she's done great, but that was just this one unfortunate moment. But don't let that get in the way of what you're going to be doing for your child, right? They do crazy stuff all the time.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad that you shared that story because I know the listeners will be like, yes, I have a similar story to share. And it's often in my one-on-one work when I've been working with someone for a while that they start to then talk about these moments that were so scary and the risk is just really high.
Yep.
And that this parent did all of this work. I mean, part of me thinks, man, she was able to have that conversation after the fact because she did all of that work, right? But this one obvious to us piece, this kid was missing. And who would have thought, right? Who would have thought? But there was no malice. There was no ill intent on his part. It also reminds me of, and we touched on this a little bit, older kids who, maybe are even young adults, older teenagers. And so they have a phone. They maybe live semi-independently. They're making relationships that are a little bit now more autonomous, not within the parent's supervision. And the parent comes to find out or understands that they've been sending text messages that are just not appropriate, but the same sort of thinking. Well, I feel this way about them. They're nice to me. Don't they feel this way about me too? Right? Just really a disconnect there.
Yes.
And so having the relationship in place to be able to have those conversations is so important.
Yeah.
The other piece that I want to just highlight about what you said, which I think is really important, is I can imagine that when you were talking about like the sex before marriage, for example, that there's some parents listening who hold that core belief very deeply and are like, oh, I do believe that's true. I want that to be true. And it's like, yes, and be informed about what is actually happening, like from this very unemotional numbers, data, research standpoint, what is happening with kids, right? And understanding that, like you said, that's a belief that you can still hold. There's nothing wrong with that, but understanding that your kids are going to be exposed to lots of information, lots of situations that are in opposition to that. And so as a parent, knowing that, parenting them from that informed place, the last piece, and I would love to get your
Mhm.
experience or just kind of thoughts on this. I have a lot of parents who have kids that maybe developmentally are what we'd consider very far behind. So
Mhm.
academically,
Mhm.
intellectually, however you want to categorize it. And I think those parents often think, well, my kids can't understand, and also they're protected. Like
Yeah.
they're just socially, it looks different for them. They're not
Yeah.
going to be exposed to this. But what happens is these kids are a wizard in
Yes.
finding things on the internet, breaking through any sort of parental
Mhm.
controls that the
Mhm.
parents tried to proactively put in place. So highlighting even for those, no parent listening is exempt.
Right. Right. This is for everyone. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So any thoughts that you have on that piece? Because yeah, that comes up
Yeah.
a lot in my conversation.
Oh, for sure. So let me see. And I don't know if you'd be interested, but we can do another episode about porn and all online safety and all of that because this is a
Mm,
bigger deal for neurodivergent kids. Stickier brains, right? Unfortunately, can really try to go for that not good stuff. So first of all, developmentally, where your kid is in terms of like, you kind of asked me two things, like their understanding. So if you've got a 12-year-old that's like more like a 9-year-old developmentally, intellectually, socially,
mhm,
they still need more information because they are in the world. They do get online. They don't have no interact. I mean, hopefully they have interactions with other people. So they do need this information. Depending on the circumstance, they might need a little bit more than a typical 9-year-old. And you cannot hurt your children by giving them this information. And again, it's protective, right? So you might need to give them a little bit more than you normally would. The other thing too is the piece around like they're sexual, they're gonna have urges, and being told like you're crushing really hard and all that, and trying to corral that really hard. But communication, right, is really important. Then with our little wizards, so, absolutely, you need to use parental controls and monitoring. It is required. It is like a seatbelt in the car.
mm,
If your child is online anywhere, especially if they are really trying to get to places and they're super curious about stuff, you really need to have that in place. And yes, they can work around it because they can get online and find information and talk to friends and that kind of thing. So, one of the ways to counteract this stuff is to talk about it and say, go over here for a safe resource where you won't get in trouble. You can look at this book. There are these safe videos over here, and give them a place to get the information that's healthy. And, we always say talk about sex. That's not right. It's communicate, right? So your kid's learning style might be that they like videos, right? And there are good websites with safe videos for kids. Make sure you have those. And so you point them over there. Using shows, you're watching a show together. Like I love the show Never Have I Ever. It's about a teenage girl and all of her business, and it's really great. And there are lots of opportunities there to talk about consent and say, oh, I love how, remember when we were watching Never Have I Ever, and there's this moment between character X and character Y, and they're having a little romance, and they asked, like, first, like, hey, can I kiss you? And the person said no. And we'd watch this great example. And then the other piece too is when your kid's out in the world, when they're going to somebody's house for a play date, you need to ask what what monitoring and filtering are you using? What are your screen time rules? Not are you, do you? You want a clear answer. And then you need to walk your talk.
yeah.
You need to walk your talk. And I do I also want to say that like I said, when it comes to pornography, this can be something that neurodivergent kids kind of get more into for a variety of reasons. And so your responsibility is to make sure that you're sex educating them so they know what's healthy, they know what's normal, and you talk about this and give them skills for what to do when they see it. And then with all of parenting, we cross our fingers,
Mm,
right? We cross our fingers and hope.
yeah. cross your fingers and hope after you do all of the proactive planning you just described.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just reemphasizing again, after having many, many conversations with parents about this, everything that we're talking about, is uncomfortable for most people for all the reasons we've talked about, and also so essential. So getting ahead of it and starting early, I say early and often.
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, we may have to have a part two, because I know that there's so much more that we
Yeah.
can dig into.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that like it's early and often, but I also just want to acknowledge folks who haven't started. What you need to do is just say to your kids, I blew it. Should have been talking with you and communicating with you about this sooner. I was uncomfortable. I didn't know what you needed to know. We're going to start.
Yeah.
And then that's it.
Yep.
And then you come back, you make a plan and you come back with them, because it's never too late. It's never too late. And start small. Start small. Like just say that to your kids.
Yep. And you didn't know what you didn't know. So
You didn't know.
we talk about that all the time on this podcast.
Yeah, you didn't know.
But yeah, I appreciate you acknowledging that, it's not too late.
Mm-mm.
Now's better than never. So
Absolutely.
I know that you mentioned quite a few resources. I would love to get those so we can include those in the show notes. And then I would love to have more information for folks listening who want to work with you, who want to find you. How
Yeah.
can they learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So my website is birdsandbeesandkids.com, and there's a lot of stuff there for you. I also am kind of on Instagram. It made me very anxious. So I was like, I share reels and stuff like that. But I'm very active on Facebook. And one of the things that I do, it's Birds, Bees, Kids. And one of the things I do that's my favorite thing is called Help Another Parent. So post a question from a parent, and then everybody else gets to chime in. I only chime in if there's trouble, but everybody else gets to chime in. So that's the best place to hang out if you're on social media. And then the download I have for you is 5 things your kids need to know ASAP and 5 things for you. And then that has all of my books and recommendations and stuff like that. So. Yeah. So, and then I also do speaking. So if you have a group that needs a little help here, I'm happy to do that, and individual consultations. So lots of things. That's all on my website. But this is fundamentally important to your kids' health and safety. And it can be fun.
Yeah.
It can be fun and funny, and it's important. And I know you're busy and stressed out, but you can plop this stuff in there, and it's kind of a greater good moment.
Yep. I'm so glad we had this discussion. I'm so glad that you're doing the work that you're doing. It's so needed, and it was wonderful having you on. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, and thank you for trusting me with your people.
Yes, you're welcome. Take care. Bye-bye. Hey, I was hoping I could ask for a really quick favor before we say goodbye. If you enjoy this podcast and you find the information that I have to share valuable to you as a parent or a provider, I would really appreciate if you took just a few minutes to provide this podcast with a 5-star review and a quick comment with how this information has positively impacted you. It is the number one way for me to reach more parents like you and I, that could really use some hope and some support as they continue to do their best to parent their child who lives with a brain-based difference and challenging behavioral symptoms. Thanks so much.